Today I'm going to be explaining another internet horror entity that has sadly been turned into brain rot mascot horror by content farms and Roblox games. But still, at its core, it is as unnerving and terrifying as any other creature. It's known as the Train Eater, and it is designed by Leon Vincible. Now, I covered the Primary Color Man by Leon earlier on the channel. Y'all really enjoyed it. It has like 300,000 views. Thank you for that. So I decided I should go ahead and jump into his universe more and talk about some creatures and some lore that he's created. There's plenty to talk about, but the Train Eater is probably one of the most famous. With that out of the way, leave a like if you want more entities from around the internet, and sit back and relax and enjoy this explanation. Let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? The Train Eater entity is one that lurks beneath cities across the world. It can disguise itself as any number of public transportation vehicles, like buses and trains and subways, and it does all of this with the goal of consuming unsuspecting human flesh. But before I get into its behavior and all that, I want to go ahead and discuss its physical appearance and description, and why it looks like that. So the creature's basic appearance is that of a long, fleshy, muscular, worm-shaped being with several features of note. The sides of the creature typically have numerous eyeballs sticking out on both the left and the right sides, and even on the top in some cases, and the front of the entity is marked by its massive set of teeth. These teeth are very sharp, the jaw is open very wide, and when it opens its mouth, you can stare right inside of it. It pretty much looks like a giant intestine with a mouth and a face. Now, inside of this mouth of the entity, where a tongue would usually be, there is some sort of conductor-shaped humanoid figure that is completely made out of flesh and muscle tissue. This little node in the mouth acts as some sort of driver or conductor of this Train Eater, and it might control where the entity goes and what it does. We're not 100% sure, but it seems like it's the brain of the entire operation. The tongue human thing is also thought to be sentient and fully aware of the war crimes that it's committing, which makes this creature even more dangerous and very terrifying for everybody across the world. The exact length and size of the entity cannot be measured accurately because photos show different lengths and sizes depending on where it's at, depending on who took the photo, and where it's going. So that could mean one of two things. One is that it might be able to adapt its size to better fit where it's at. Sort of like an octopus and how it can shrink down and go through really tiny holes because it has no bones. Maybe it can do that. Or number two, it just takes the exact shape and size of whatever it's mimicking, and that's all it can do. So if it wants to be a bus, it'll morph into the size of a bus. If it wants to be a train, it'll morph into the size of a train, and so on and so forth. You get it, you're not dumb. The leading theory is the latter one that I just mentioned, because another key feature of the Train Eater is that it can modify its body to blend in physically using things like windows and doors and seats and handles and even lighting to make itself appear more like an actual train or bus. Of course, it does this with the goal of luring these innocent people on board to get on, and then that's when the consuming part happens, which I'll explain in a second. The Train Eater also mimics the sounds of whatever it's attempting to turn into. So train horns, gear sounds, pressure releases from brakes, you'll hear that just like you would a regular piece of public transport. Now, most people getting on the subway or getting on a train in real life, they're not really paying attention to every small detail of what they're about to get onto. You know, they're just assuming it's a normal thing. Like every other day, they're just about to get on their bus or train to work or whatever. But a person with a keen eye might be able to tell something's off when they're about to walk inside of the Train Eater. Maybe there'll be a rotten smell or a saliva dripping down the sides or a gurgling noise or two that might give you this gut feeling that you need to walk away. Whatever the case is, it is very hard to tell the difference between the actual train and the Train Eater because it mimics real transportation so well. But if you lock in and you watch what you're doing, you might live. But anyways, I'm sure you're asking, how does the Train Eater actually consume its victims? So the basic way is that people waiting for a train or a subway or whatever simply walk forward and get on the Train Eater. And of course, the entity will be masking itself and blending in as whatever it's supposed to be. So on the outside, it seems normal, but believing it is all normal, the people will get in, they'll walk on the door, and they'll shuffle down the hallways and they'll find a seat. Everything will seem all right until the doors of the Train Eater slam shut. At this point, passengers will know something is wrong, and they'll begin to see the walls transform into flesh and tendons and veins and muscle and saliva. That saliva will begin to seep out out from beneath their seats and puddle up where they stand. And now they'll see that they're trapped inside of a giant flesh tube with no escape. The inside and the interior of the train eater is similar to that of an intestine or a stomach. It's almost impenetrable and it's made out of really muscly fiber flesh, so knives and other sharp objects probably are not going to cut through it. However, as of right now, we really don't know if bigger weapons like grenades or dynamite would work. I'm assuming it would, but there's only one way to find out. Who wants to try it? But now that the train eater has these people trapped inside of it, the digestion process begins. And this occurs when the passengers are standing there, they're freaking out, and they'll notice that saliva coming from the interior walls and leaking up from the floor. Essentially, this saliva is extremely toxic and corrosive and acts sort of like a stomach acid. You shouldn't touch it because it can disintegrate you. But once the acid does touch the humans inside, they will begin to dissolve into food. And if they don't do that, if they're somehow wearing clothing that'll protect them, they'll eventually just drown once all the saliva fills up to the top, because the train eater fills its entire inside up with this very toxic material, and that is how it consumes and dissolves all of its victims. Once that's done, the saliva will seep back into the walls of the creature, and it'll be able to go on to the next train stop and do it all over again. While all of this is happening, the train eater is moving at an insanely fast speed to get away from any witnesses and to get on to the next train stop. And because of this, only a few pictures of its true form have actually ever been taken, and those are the ones that you're seeing here in this video. The entity is very efficient, it's very fast, and it can digest and feed and do all of that extremely quickly. In less than 15 minutes, it can consume an entire train load of people, and then it'll be back at the next train stop, mimicking the next train, or whatever it's gonna do forever. Oftentimes, it can get several rounds of people before individuals notice that others are missing. So, in some images of the creature, there are visible legs that stick out of its body on the bottom part, and this leads to the belief that the train eater can get up and can walk out of the subway onto the surface and walk around like a giant centipede with hundreds of little legs on its stomach. As if it couldn't get terrifying enough, this thing can move anywhere it wants to on the streets, which means that nowhere is safe. Yay. No one knows its intentions, no one knows where it came from, if it's an alien, if it's of the earth, no one really knows what it is. But all we know is that it has an insatiable taste for human flesh, and it lurks on these public transportation sites just to consume innocent victims and dissolve them with its stomach acid. Instances of the train eater have been seen all over the world, especially in societies that rely on public transportation, which means that if you're in a city, you might run into it. If you're not in a city and you live out in the country like me, then you're probably chilling. We don't have trains out here. But maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe it's coming for me now that I did. But that is the description of the train eater. All the lore we have, its design, and all of that. And it's a gut-wrenching thing, right? It's terrifying. I mean, it dissolves entire train loads of people and then consumes them while they're trying to go to work. But again, like I said in the intro, the train eater is sadly another victim to the children's content farm, Among Us, mascot horror, clickbait, content farm trash. All of this slop has happened to many internet horror creatures, just like Siren Head, the cartoon cat, the sea eater, the bloop entity, all that stuff. It's sad to see. I mean, these are genuinely horrifying entities with their own, lore and their own scariness about them. And it sucks that they've been marketed in that way where it appeals to younger kids. And it mainly does so to take advantage of them. I think I'm probably going to make a video on how or if internet horror can actually survive the brain rot, so expect that soon. But hopefully this video will act as a sort of real and non-brain rot explanation of the train eater entity. That way you can get the real facts just as they're presented and none of the brain rot slop stuff that I see all over the internet. I did this with Siren Head, I did this with Cartoon Cat and Sea Eater and the Primary Color Man. I'm trying to make actual realistic, adulty videos about these internet horror entities. That way if somebody actually wants to figure out what they're about, if they want to learn about cool creatures and cool analog stuff, then they can come here and they can watch it. So hopefully that is what this video worked as, and that's hopefully what my entire channel worked as. But with that said, I hope you did enjoy the video. Thank you for watching to the end. Let me know in the comments what other internet creatures I should explain. I'll add them to my list. I'm looking forward to doing more of these. Hopefully you did enjoy it. And like I said, I'm just trying to be like a non-brain rot internet creepy channel. So that's been my goal since day one, and I think I'm doing pretty well. I think I've done these creatures justice. Hopefully I can continue to do so and stand against the YouTube slop content stuff. Thank y'all so much for watching. Make sure you tell somebody you love them because life is too short not to. And with all that said and done, have a great day, and I will see you later.